Welcome to Football Never Sleeps, the weekly YouTube Notre Dame football show brought to you by me, Eric Hansen, him, Tyler James, and Inside ND Sports. And if you loved that countdown music that we have coming into our show, we apologize for your life. But I promise you what's to follow will be much better than the countdown. And we've got a lot to talk about tonight, including what's going on with the cornerback room at Notre Dame. We've got recruiting. Notre Dame is done with their Easter break. So we'll have lots of new reporting on football this week, including maybe some recruiting as well. We realize we are going against Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. And if you are multitasking, we really appreciate you. We take your questions and your comments. And Tyler's going to tell you how to do that. And we'll work them in during our conversation tonight. Tyler?
Yeah, make sure that you are subscribed to us over here on YouTube. We're approaching 2,500 subscribers on the channel. We'd like to hit that mark soon. So if you could help us out, if you are not subscribed here, it's free just to click. That's all it requires of you. You can also hit the bell for reminders of when we'll have content coming your way. We're trying to keep a weekly schedule here. Football Never Sleeps through spring football. And make sure you hit the like button on this video to show your support for the show. Easy for me to say. If you are interested in sending us comments or questions during the show, make sure you've clicked through to YouTube's website or app to be able to do so. On the right-hand side, you should find a comment box if you're on a desktop version of some sort. And if you're on a mobile device, you should see a box for comments and questions below our talking head. So hopefully you can find that. Please keep the Iowa game play-by-play to a minimum, which we had a little bit of an issue with last week. But we're interested to see how that game goes, but we certainly don't want to bog down the chat with play-by-play here. If you're not a subscriber to us over on InsideNDSports.com and you are feeling really bad about your odds of getting a free subscription because I am currently in first place in the men's bracket challenge on Inside ND Sports, we still have a 30-day free trial available to new users. You can use promo code NDYT, which is exclusive to our YouTube audience, when you sign up to get free access to our premium analysis and recruiting coverage and special access to us over on the Insider Lounge, where we spend a lot of our time and share our inside information. First, there is a link to sign up for that deal in the video description below. Again, use code NDYT for a free 30-day trial. All right, Eric, back to you.
Just curious, who's leading the women's basketball challenge?
I don't know. Do you know that?
Yeah, it's me. Okay. And I'm not too far down in the national rankings on that one. So
I know you told me last night that I might win the whole national tournament. I was like, oh crap, I didn't realize you were doing that good.
Yeah, I don't know if that's realistic, but I think I can get at least to where my name appears. So all right, so we are taking stock in Notre Dame football as spring practice resumes after another pause, this one for a shorter hiatus for Easter break. Notre Dame will hold its 7th of 15 spring practices on Wednesday following a break for Easter, then blip past the halfway point on Saturday on their way to the Blue Gold game set for 1 o'clock Eastern time on April 20th at Notre Dame Stadium. So our opening drive tonight is about cornerback calculus. And last week, Ben Morrison had shoulder surgery. Clarence Lewis parachutes into the transfer portal. The first coming there was Ben Morrison, because Tyler had to write it up, undergoing shoulder surgery that will keep him out the rest of spring practice. This is not expected to affect his 2024 season, but do we have a sense, Tyler, of when he'll return to normal football activities in the post-spring off season?
No, I have not heard anything as it relates to that. I think we're still pretty soon after his surgery to know that for sure. Maybe some folks have some ideas about what that would be, but I don't know that it's probably something that they want to put out there in terms of getting ahead of themselves. So we'll have to wait and see what Notre Dame and Benjamin Morrison can share with us as it relates to his rehab schedule and what that looks like. But certainly he's one of the few players you would think, okay, if someone's going to miss spring and you're going to feel confident about him in the fall if he's healthy, it would be Benjamin Morrison. He's one of the best players on the team, if not the best player on the team, and someone that I think the expectations will still be extremely high for going into the season as long as he's healthy.
Yeah, and we are going to interview defensive backs coach Mike Mickens on Wednesday. We're also getting some cornerbacks. I'm not sure if he'll be in that group, but we should get some good information on Wednesday. Later in the week, then, senior Clarence Lewis announced he was entering the portal, and because Lewis will be a grad transfer, he didn't have to wait for the April 15th to 30th spring window to put his name in. This puts Notre Dame at 90 scholarship players with a max of 85, needing to be reached by the first day of fall semester classes, which is a long way away, and we don't anticipate that being a problem. But Tyler, how surprised were you with Lewis's decision, both the timing and the decision itself?
The timing was surprising for it to happen sort of midway through spring, right before Easter break was a bit surprising. The fact that he chose to do so at all wasn't surprising. I had him high on my list of guys that I thought may consider doing that going into the spring, back in the winter portal era window. And so when that passed, it's like, okay, well, that's a good thing that he's on Notre Dame's roster and providing depth there. And I mean, we were at practice last week after Benjamin Morrison goes down and Clarence Lewis is taking reps with the number ones. So that's, I mean, that you don't see that a lot, where 2 days after a guy's taking first team reps, he's in the transfer portal. But that is exactly what happened. I mean, I do, in transparency, I don't think Clarence Lewis, if that current roster situation was the way it was, I don't think he would have been the starter. I think Christian Gray and Jaden Mickey would have been starters opposite each other, but they had continued to have those two battle each other at the same position, which they had done before Benjamin Morrison's injury. So I think that's why Notre Dame really stuck with that for that first practice last Wednesday. But yeah, the timing is strange. The decision is not crazy. Some people they're like, why is he leaving? He has so much he has so much opportunity to play. It's like, well, I mean, I guess, but he's at best Notre Dame's fourth cornerback, right? I mean, he's their number 4 corner, the number 2 nickel. I would imagine he thinks he can find somewhere else that he can play more. And so if that's what he wants to do after getting a Notre Dame degree, which he's on track to do in May, more power to him. So I can understand him wanting to seek out more playing opportunities, because I don't know that there's a lot of them, unless Notre Dame was going to have some more and long-lasting cornerback injuries.
Yeah, he, to me, feels like an insurance policy, and I can understand why he would want to be a guy that says, hey, I can start somewhere. I've got my Notre Dame degree. I want to see if I can start for somebody else. And he was a starter earlier in his career, and then the cornerback talent has just continued to grow. He brings a lot of versatility. He could probably play safety. We definitely know he can play nickel, but I think had he been prioritized as the number 1 nickel option, then he probably would have said, okay, I'm staying. You guys convinced me. But there was not that guarantee. Jordan Clark is the number 1 option at that nickel position. So given the fact that, including Jordan Clark, they're down to 8 cornerbacks, what's your sense in terms of, does Notre Dame need to take a little bit more than a cursory look at the transfer portal? I mean, they're always monitoring it, but do they need to maybe look a little bit harder, or do you think 8 is enough in terms of quantity? And they certainly have quality, as long as as long as Ben's injury doesn't look like it's going to drag on.
Yeah, I mean, I think Notre Dame has to at least consider it, right?
Yeah.
Unless, I mean, when you say 8 cornerbacks, you're including Jordan Clark as a nickelback, who is probably more of a safety than a corner, at least in my opinion. If you ask me what's his second best position after nickel, I'd probably say safety rather than outside corner. So to me, it comes down to whether or not you have confidence in a guy like Chance Tucker, Do you have confidence in a guy like Micah Bell? Those are the two guys that are scholarship players who are returning, who have some experience in the program. Are they ready to take that next step to be essentially what Clarence Lewis was? And Micah Bell's been getting reps at Nickelback, and so he would be a guy that could potentially fill both of those roles that Clarence Lewis was playing. Does Notre Dame feel that way? I don't know that for certain. So I think it's a tough ask in terms of trying to find someone in the portal. Like, come in here and be our fourth best corner. Like that's a really hard needle to thread. Maybe there's some guy there that has some experience and doesn't have a lot of playing opportunities at wherever he's at, and was like, well, maybe I can go to Notre Dame and maybe they'll have a special season. And
Antonio Carter
that can lure them in. So yeah, I don't think he's gone anywhere. At least to my knowledge, I haven't seen him end up anywhere. But I don't know that he would be a great cornerback for Notre Dame either. So yeah, I think it's worth a look, but I don't know that that's necessarily going to be a great option for Notre Dame either.
And then as we look at the two cornerbacks that are not yet on campus yet, Hobbs and Leonard Moore, Carson Hobbs and Leonard Moore, do either of them profile as a guy that you could fast track and get him to where you could, he could be like a second teamer if it really came to that?
I think Leonard Moore is better suited for that personally. I think there may be some disagreements on that. That's certainly how Rivals has them ranked, and I tend to agree with them there. You do like what Carson Hobbs was able to do as a cornerback out of Cincinnati Moeller High School. So I think they're good, talented cornerback recruits, and Mike Mickens has shown an ability to coach up freshmen, right? Like that's something that he has had a long history of being able to do. So
including himself.
If someone's going to be able to do that, I think Mike Mickens is someone you have confidence in doing that with. So I think that's sort of why, unless you're just totally not confident in Chance Tucker and or Micah Bell, then I think you could probably sit pat because you do like the guys that you have coming in the summer.
Okay, before we move to running back conversation, do we need to hit the question portal?
Sure. We got one here from Frank Sarah. Hey, guys, hope you had a great Easter. My question is, do you think Notre Dame will try to get an offensive tackle and a tight end in the portal, maybe another position?
I did have a great Easter. Thank you for asking. I think the deeper we go into spring, the less unless somebody leaves, the less I'm convinced that they'll look for a tackle. And tight end, I think we'll get a better feel for that as we talk to Mike Denbrock on Saturday. I think the only thing that would nudge you in that direction is if there were three tight ends that were all iffy with injuries, and that's Mitchell Evans, Kevin Bauman, and Eli Reardon. And right at this minute, I mean, there's not anything that indicates they're off schedule, but none of them are 100%, ready to go. And that's a little bit concerning. So I think they can wait to the end of spring and see, kind of redo their inventory at that point and see how optimistic they are that most of those guys will be ready to go in the fall, because otherwise you're going to have too many. And you already have 5 more spots that have to fall off the roster before August. So bringing in another tight end at this point, if everybody's going to stay and everybody's going to be healthy, I think would be kind of an overdoing it. How about you, Tyler?
Yeah, I think unless you feel like 2 of those guys are going to miss a significant amount of time this season, I don't know that you do that. I mean, as is, you're talking about a position that has 6 scholarship tight ends. Does Notre Dame need 7? That seems like a lot. So I don't know that adding another tight end in the portal makes a lot of sense. As for offensive tackle, I remain convinced if there's someone that Notre Dame thinks can be a starting offensive tackle for Notre Dame next season in the portal, that they will pursue them. Now, does that person exist? I don't know. It didn't come to fruition in the winter portal window. Will it happen in April? We will see. But I'm not I'm still not certain that if Notre Dame sees that person and there's an obvious guy that's like that guy can come here and start, that they wouldn't pull the trigger on him. So we'll see how that plays out. Other positions, obviously, we were talking about the cornerback spot. I don't know that Notre Dame really is transfer portal needy unless they have like a significant wave at at a specific position. Maybe a defensive tackle, I guess you could look at for someone with some experience there. But again, you're pitching, okay, you could be at best our third best defensive tackle behind Riley Mills and Howard Cross. And there seems to be growing confidence with the young guys there. Viper end was something that always was intriguing to me just because is Jordan Botello really your only and best option there? But I think Boubacar Traore is climbing the depth chart fast, and you have some experience there with Junior Tuli Halamaka, so I don't know that that's where Notre Dame would look either. So I think, at least right now, I think we're going to see Notre Dame's exits outnumber its incoming transfers in this next portal wave. I would be surprised if Notre Dame, unless they have a bunch of guys that just quit football or have medical hardships, they're not going to. They have to have more leave than come just because of the scholarship math. But I think that's probably what is likely to end up happening. That we're going to see more guys leave than join Notre Dame because the amount of guys they were able to get in the winter period.
Well, let me ask you this then. Let's say they do find a starting tackle in the portal. If that happens, is there a reaction to that? Does one of the tackles leave because they are bumped from consideration from being a starter?
I mean, if it's right tackle, certainly it wouldn't be surprising if Tosh Baker wanted to leave. I think Charles Jagusa is way too early in his career to want to hit the Jets. And one of those guys is still going to start, right? If they get one tackle, one of those guys should still start unless Emil Wagner beats both of those guys out or something like that. So yeah, there probably would be an exit, but that would be why Notre Dame is getting someone, because they don't have. If they were to get someone like that in the portal, it was because Notre Dame felt that it didn't have a starting quality player at that position at this time. It has backup tackles, whether or not one of them leaves. Like, there are going to be other backup tackle options, so I think you would live with that trade-off. Obviously, you wouldn't want Charles Jagusa to leave because he's such a highly touted guy and is so advanced early in his career. But I think it'd be also wild to speculate that he would leave so early in his career just because Notre Dame took a transfer at tackle.
Okay, do we want to move on to running backs, or do we have more questions?
I got one more question from Jeffrey Stevens, and if you have other questions, folks, please feel free to shoot them our way. Does it seem odd that both Howard Cross and Riley Mills are sitting out practice? I realize they are solid starters in the fall, but don't they need to practice?
What do you say, Tyler, to that?
Well, I don't think they're sitting out all the practices. I think there's some practices where they have some other things that they have to do. And so they haven't been practicing. I think it's the last 2 Wednesdays we've been at practice. They haven't been practicing, but my understanding is they're practicing on other days. That's not they're not just skipping practice constantly. So it's not like Notre Dame's just letting him go through. I mean, they're probably still practicing more than Jordan Faison is. Granted, he's playing lacrosse, but Jordan Faison hasn't done much that we've seen. But certainly he's definitely staying very active on the lacrosse field.
Yeah, and they right now they do feel really good about getting reps for the younger players, because they really need to kind of sift through them and look at them and see who warrants being in that rotation, whether it's all the way down to third team. I think they know the second teamers pretty well at this point. But yeah, I mean, they do need to practice some, and I do think Tyler has a good read on that in terms of that they are getting some practices. Yeah,
and Matt Washington was honest. He's like, yeah, it actually does kind of make it easier when those guys aren't practicing, because we can get some of these other defensive tackles who we want high leverage reps for, get them work, get them action against Notre Dame's front line interior offensive linemen, and those guys that are third stringers. It's hard to get quality reps for third string guys. So if you're missing your first string guys, that does give you a better opportunity to get some of those reps for those guys. So I think the absences of Mills and Cross at times is being taken advantage of by some of the guys that really need the work.
Okay, so what we learned about the running back stable last week. So we had a chance to speak to running backs coach Dylan McCullough and running backs Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, and Aeneas Williams last Wednesday. One of the interesting aspects in our limited look at Wednesday's practice was that sophomore running back Jeremiah Love was in some of the individual periods with the wide receivers. And then we had a chance to follow that up with both McCullough and Love. So what did we find out about that, Tyler?
Yeah, I think most importantly, it's that Dylan McCullough is confident enough in the way Jeremiah Love has progressed at running back that he's willing to give up practice time for him, because Jeremiah Love is still going into his sophomore year, right? This is a very young player who I think at times it can hurt a guy when you start cross-training them early on. But when Jeremiah Love is in a position where he's had experience already at running back and the running backs coach is confident in his ability to continue to retain and improve on that, that says, I think it says a lot about where Jeremiah Love is as a running back. Jeremiah Love seems to be very on board with it. He's open to do whatever he can to get the ball more, give the offense some help, get the ball in space, use his talents in as many ways as possible. I guess the question moving forward is, like, how good is he out of the backfield as a receiver? Do they use him more out of the backfield? Does he line up in the slot more? And then also, does Notre Dame need more help in the slot? That seems like one of the positions where, for once in a rare time, Notre Dame seems to have a lot of guys at slot receiver. How does that change what Notre Dame's rotation looks at the receiver position if Jeremiah Love's getting some snaps out there as well?
Well, could you just split him out and put him at the field receiver, given his speed, and not?
Well, I mean, he's practicing at slot. He said that specifically.
Right. I do know that, but could you do that?
Yeah, but I wouldn't be practicing him at slot if that's where I wanted him to play.
Right, but I mean, they just may be moving him around and seeing what he can do. I just was curious. Yeah, the slot. I mean, when you think back, at least in the Brian Kelly era, there wasn't a lot of really good production from the slot receiver. That was kind of Notre Dame's weakness on both sides of the ball. The slot receiver, and often the nickel wasn't particularly a strong position either. So it's nice to see them load up. And again, there will be another slot guy in Logan Saldate, who's coming in June at a slot receiver position. So, and then Dylan is pretty animated and pretty entertaining when he talks. I mean, he does not lack confidence. No. And he feels like the roles are starting to define themselves for the 5 running backs. So what was your takeaway from Dylan in terms of, once you get past the confidence part of that, how do you see those 5 kind of shaking out right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now it seems like Jadarian Price is more of an early down back, because he talked about how he needs to earn his 3rd down certificate. It's this thing where Dylan McCullough needs to have the confidence in you to be someone who can pass block at a high level in high leverage situations on 3rd downs. And so that's what is required for you to earn your 3rd down certificate. And Jadarian Price is still working on that. So maybe we see more Jeremiah Love on 3rd down. Now, obviously, we got a long way to go until the season comes. But I think 3rd down was obviously somewhere where Jabron Payne was able to have some success in a short yardage role. Maybe we see more expansion of that in a passing down role as well. I think there's a high trust in Jabron Payne. Dylan McCullough talks very highly about having the confidence in him to do basically anything that he's asked. Although I think some folks, myself included, haven't seen like the giant flashes of talent in Jabron Payne, but he just seems to be like a workhorse and a guy that's in the right place. And that's a very important part of the job. So I think that's something that Dylan McCullough is very confident in and wants to continue to rely on. I think that the trust, sort of getting back to what we were talking about, that the fact that Jeremiah Love is being able to take some reps at receiver That speaks to the confidence that Dylan McCullough has in him, I think. And then sort of beyond that, I think you're looking at the freshmen, Aeneas Williams and Kedron Young, still needing to earn it and find roles for themselves moving forward.
And Kedron needs to find consistent health right now.
Right.
I think that's probably what's holding him back, because he definitely has a different body type than the other running backs. He's a bigger back and carries that weight really well. As we get to August, do you think that we're going to be having the same conversation with the running backs, that it's basically these are the roles? Or do you think one of those freshmen could reshape at least third down, maybe?
I'm not ready to say that yet. I getting back to the trust that Dylan has in Jabron Payne, I think there's a big leap that someone has to take to pass him. So right now I sort of see Price and Love as sort of 1A and 1B at your running back spot. Maybe whoever gets more carries is whoever's having more success on a given Saturday. And then Jabron Payne's more of a situational guy where there's different roles that they like him in. And then you sort of use Aeneas Williams and Kedron Young if or when they're needed. So I think there's probably going to still be a gap there. But that's not a reflection of how good those guys can be. I like both of those guys as running back prospects. And Kedron Young does not look like a prospect. He looks like more of a finished product than a prospect, but certainly has a lot to prove here at Notre Dame still.
Okay, we have special teams next on the docket. Do we have questions we need to hit before we go there?
I don't see any questions, no.
Okay. So we heard from special teams coordinator Marty Biaggi also on Wednesday. He's also coaching safeties this spring. And we also had a chance to talk to long snappers Reno Monteforte and Andrew Cross. Are there any open competitions going on at kicker, punter, holder, and snapper?
Snapper, yes. That's the only one. Everyone else, I think we all know that Mitch Jeter was brought in to be the starting kicker. Bryce McPherson's still the starting punter. And McPherson's also the starting holder unless they decide to change things up on us. But I didn't ask any hard-hitting holder questions, but I would imagine that's how they'll go with things.
That's what we've seen too.
Yeah.
In practices. We've seen McPherson doing that. I also found out that McPherson's a pretty good drummer because Reno Monteforte told me that. Do we expect Notre Dame to be stronger at kicker and punter in 2024 than they were last season? Spencer Schrader and the younger version of McPherson.
Yeah, I think so. Certainly past success indicates that Mitch Jeter can be better than Spencer Schrader. Jeter made 92% of his field goals the last two seasons, 23 of 25. Last season, Schrader was 15 of 22, which is 68.2%. But that's in part to do with Notre Dame asking him to kick extremely long field goals as well. So Notre Dame didn't help his percentage out there. But if you look back at Schrader's career coming into Notre Dame, he never made better than 85% of his field goals either. So Jeter seems to have a track record of better accuracy. I don't know if he has the same sort of leg strength that Schrader has, but maybe that's not necessary. And if you have a good offense that you want to be aggressive with, I think you would trade someone that can kick long field goals because you just go for it on fourth down. And then as long as then when you get closer, you say, okay, our field goal kicker is automatic. And that's I think what you'd like to have. As for Bryce, I think he can be better as a punter. His per punt average was 45.1 yards, which is funny. I was looking up the stats. He only punted 38 times, which meant he didn't meet the NCAA minimum to be ranked among the punt leaders. You had to hit at least 3.6 punts per game, and he was under 3 with 292. So that just speaks to how good Notre Dame's offense was at avoiding punts last year. But Notre Dame was 83rd in net punting, which is something they need to improve. So I think those two things can improve. The 45.1, if he did qualify, would have put him in a tie for 18th place, I believe. So that's a pretty good average. It's not elite necessarily, but it's getting close. So I think Notre Dame needs to find the best sort of mix of length and hang time to be able to take advantage of that. And ball placement, that's important, of where you're punting the ball to set up your coverage team to be able to get down the field and make those tackles.
Yeah, John Sott, who preceded McPherson, when you'd watch those guys, you could definitely tell McPherson had a little bit better leg, but Sott was so good on his placement, and Notre Dame was such better team in terms of net punting. He didn't have as many returned. He was not too many rolled into the end zone. So those are the things that Bryce needs to work on. So we had a chance to talk to the long snappers, and it was quite an experience. I had one of them. I had Reno Monteforte. And long snappers are guys that really don't get noticed unless they mess up. Reno gets noticed because he's a different size than a lot of the long snappers at Notre Dame. Michael Vincent was a pretty big guy. Andrew Cross is a big guy. There's a third walk-on long snapper on the roster who's well over 6 feet and well over 200 pounds. And then you have Reno, who's 5'7", 195. I thought it was interesting, Tyler, that we saw these guys doing tackling drills, and that's one of the things that we talked to Reno about. But what's your sense of the long snapper situation, and do you have any impressions of Reno, or do you want me to share mine since I was?
Yeah, I'll let you talk about Reno, but I'll talk about the two guys more broadly. Yeah, the size discrepancy is obvious. In my story, I wrote, like, you wouldn't, if you just saw the two guys, you wouldn't think they played the same position on the football field, right? Like a 5'7" and 6'3" guy usually aren't two guys playing the same position, but you can snap the ball between your legs with consistency and accuracy and velocity. It doesn't matter necessarily what your height and weight are. It does matter as it relates to punt coverage, which you mentioned they're working on tackling. That's why they're doing that, because those guys are going to have to go down and make tackles at times. So can you have Reno Monteforte tackling? Is he big enough to tackle guys? Is Andrew Cross fast enough to get down the field and tackle guys? I don't necessarily know their limitations beyond the size that they have. Cross did tell me that it was easier for him to punt snaps, or to snap for punts. I don't know. Marty Biaggi, which I think is interesting, he seemed to be open to the idea of them using separate snappers for field goal and punting, which you don't see all the time, but you do see sometimes. And if Notre Dame feels that's the best way to do it, they could certainly opt to do so. Now, would it be Cross punt and Reno at field goals? I don't necessarily know that for sure, but that's something that is at least still on the table from Marty Biaggi's point of view.
So Reno, not only do people maybe not think he plays the same position as Andrew Cross, they're not even sure he plays the same sport as Andrew Cross. He said that people typically guess that he's either a fencer or a cheerleader. And he said that he's kind of used to that treatment over his lifetime, and that he kind of laughs it off and just kind of goes about his business. He does give a lot of credit to both Matt Bayless's staff and Lauren Lando's staff in terms of nutrition and helping him reshape his body. He has lost 26 pounds since he's come to Notre Dame, and 10% body fat. He is, a real personality, and you can see why he's gotten to where he is. Just he's a guy that overcomes a lot of things, overcomes a lot of odds. And the fact that he's kind of got the inside track to the job really speaks to his fortitude, and he has lots of motivation. He's an interesting guy. He's a drummer. He's a theology major. But it's really going to be interesting to see if he can make it. I think a lot of people will be rooting for him. And he takes the tackling very seriously. And it was pretty funny because with a straight face, he goes, "Well, I'm not as good as Jack Kaiser yet." And I'm thinking, okay, well, if you can take if there is a point where you are as good as Jack Kaiser at tackling, I think that would be a story I would be happy to write. So really an interesting side note. I know a lot of people root for the walk-ons. This is a guy that's easy to root for. And so we'll see how that plays out. The other thing that I thought was kind of interesting from Biaggi's standpoint was how I think we forget how close it was to when he was hired to when spring practice started last year.
Mm-hmm.
And there wasn't a great deal of time to put the coverage schemes and really work on that. The one thing he had in his favor was Marcus Freeman is all in on special teams, and that did help their special teams. So, Tyler, as we look ahead, considering the commitment to special teams, considering that Marty Biaggi has more time to work on those things, would we expect coverage teams, which weren't very good, to be better this year, and return teams, which actually were pretty good, to be better in 2024?
Yeah, I think so. I think Notre Dame's going to continue to have the players and the ability to take meaningful players, like guys that are good defensive players can be on your coverage units. Like Marcus Freeman is going to encourage that. And so there's a commitment to that. And so that's going to help Marty Biaggi. That's been consistent throughout the Marcus Freeman tenure. And so I think Marty Biaggi, having gone through a full year at Notre Dame, figuring out how Marcus Freeman works his practices, how they can find the windows to get these guys better, and what do they need to get them better on specifically, I think it should allow Notre Dame to be better all around when it comes to its special teams units, and not just the kicking and the punting physically, the actual coverage and returns of those things as well. So I think that Marty Biaggi has a very detailed plan for what he wants to do. You see when they're out there, when we get the first 5 periods of practice that we get to watch, there usually is a special teams unit or period in that, and it's usually devoted to one specific thing. Some days it's field goal, some days it's punt coverage, some days it's punt returns, and so that's something that they're working through. And you would like to think that Notre Dame should have good personnel to make that happen, and also a coaching system that will allow them to take advantage of that. I think Jaden Harrison coming on the team as a kick returner makes that kick return unit more dangerous. He returned 2 kicks for touchdowns last year at Marshall. Jordan Faison, I would imagine he ends up being the starting punt returner, though we haven't seen that in practice because of his spring obligations to lacrosse, but his shiftiness is pretty good. That was a question that Joe Long asked in the chat. Do you think Faison would be a good punt returner? And I do. I just think his lateral quickness is crazy. He has very good acceleration, and I think his vision's pretty good too. So if there's someone that should be good at punt returns, it has to be someone like Jordan Faison. So as long as he has good ball security and is good at catching the punts and making sure that that's not an issue, I would like to think that he's going to have some potential to do some good things for Notre Dame as a punt returner.
One new face for me, at least in the punt return gong show, was KK Smith that we saw last Wednesday. I hadn't seen him back there before fielding punts. Then Marty Biaggi got asked about this dual role, helping coach safeties and doing the special teams. So when you had a chance to kind of hear that, did it seem to make sense? Did it seem like this is something that is doable?
Yeah, it didn't surprise me that it made sense, because I had been saying it made sense as soon as Chris O'Leary left, that Marty Biaggi should help out with the defensive backs because of his resume. And so he sort of articulated how much he learned early on in his career as a defensive guy. Starting in 2008, he was a graduate assistant at Arkansas and was given some defensive responsibilities. And then, I mean, his first full-time job beyond being a graduate assistant was as a co-defensive coordinator. So obviously someone thought highly of his defensive knowledge. That was in 2011 at Arkansas Pine Bluff. Then he spent 3 seasons at Southern coaching defensive backs and special teams. And then he was a cornerbacks coach for 1 season at South Dakota before he ended up at Notre Dame as a special teams analyst for 1 season in 2016. So he compared defense as kind of like riding a bike. Like he knows what's going on. He knows all the schemes. he certainly has to catch up with the level of coaching that Al Golden and Mike Mickens are at, and Chris O'Leary was at. But he felt pretty confident in his ability to sort of get up to speed with those guys and help them out, and be a valuable asset. It was something that he said that Marcus Freeman and him had discussed a little bit last year, because he was joining the team so late in spring, like we mentioned. It didn't really make sense to sort of add another thing to his plate. And so he had a primary focus on special teams last year, and now will be helping out a little bit with the defensive backs, which is something Brian Mason spent some time helping out. I think he might have done a little bit of rovers and then some nickels, and then done different things at times. So I think there's as long as you have a coach that's willing to do it and has the knowledge base, it makes a lot of sense to take advantage of that.
And there's plenty of people watching practice that think they're coaches. So there would be, just kidding. Okay. So before we move on to recruiting, and thank you for the compliment, Jeffrey Stevens. Do we have any more questions to take before recruiting?
I don't see any questions. We're running out of time here. So if you got questions, please feel free to send them in here. Otherwise we still have other stuff to discuss. So don't worry about it, but we'd love to answer anything you specifically want to know about.
And it doesn't have to be about something that we've talked about yet.
Oh yeah. Honestly, if it's not, it's even better. So we get to a topic that
you could even ask us about Hannah Hidalgo's nose ring. Okay,
I'll forward all those questions to Eric.
Recruiting reset. On Saturday, 4-star linebacker Anthony Sacca became Notre Dame's 19th verbal commitment in the number 1 ranked 2025 class. He chose the Irish over finalists Alabama, Duke, Ohio State, and Wisconsin. He's the son of former Penn State quarterback Tony Sacca. He's a 6'4", 225-pound linebacker from Philly. Where might Sacca fit into Notre Dame's scheme, Tyler?
Yeah, I think he probably ends up as a Mike or Will linebacker at Notre Dame. He has some versatility as a former safety, but I think it's really hard to project a lot of guys at Rover, and I don't know that he would necessarily be able to hold up out there. So I project him as an inside linebacker during his Notre Dame career. But another big get for Notre Dame, sort of an extension of Notre Dame's high-level linebacker recruiting in the Marcus Freeman era. They're consistently getting linebackers who are 4-star recruits. Kingston Viliamu-Asa last cycle was a 5-star recruit. And so they're getting Rivals 100 guys, which Anthony Sacca is. So a lot of talented linebackers that Notre Dame has been recruiting, and Anthony Sacca sort of adds to that tradition here that's been established under Marcus Freeman.
So he's the second linebacker in the class. I got Ka'o Kia earlier, 3-star from Hawaii. And then, so what do we think is going to be the total number of linebackers they take in this class, and who's kind of being prioritized at this point?
Yeah, the linebackers can be a little bit confusing because Dominic Kulak is someone that Rivals ranks as a linebacker and has played a lot of linebacker in high school, but is projected to end up as a Viper at Notre Dame. So you're right that Notre Dame has 2 now. I think they probably only end up with 1 more. I don't know that they'll be able to push to add 2 more guys. There are a lot of options out there. I think the top preference in terms of someone that Notre Dame is confident with their interest in Notre Dame and the playing level of this player is Madden Faramo out of California. Is a very talented linebacker that the Irish like a lot. He's a very quiet kid, doesn't talk a lot about his recruitment, but Notre Dame's in his Final Four right now. I think USC is probably the biggest competition there. There's a couple of California linebackers that Notre Dame's going after that USC's a big-time contender for. Noah McHale is another one. There's a few more linebackers, Nathaniel Usu-Boateng and Gavin Nix, both IMG Academy guys that are linebackers that are top targets for the Irish. Antoine de Lauriers, I can't remember exactly how to say his name, but he is a Canadian who's playing down in Georgia, and he is also someone that Notre Dame was high on too. I'm pretty
confident you butchered that, but
yeah, I'm confident. I'm confident I am too, but I did remember it once and wrote it down, and then I forgot to note it when I wrote down his name for the show, which would have been of much more help. We've seen Notre Dame going after lots of linebackers. I do expect that to maybe trimmed down a bit, but Notre Dame's going to keep pushing guys and pushing for guys and try to see who can get that potentially last spot in the class, because it does sort of help Notre Dame sometimes when it has that leverage. Like, hey, if you want the class, you better get in here fast because we don't have a lot of room left. And so that's sort of the position Notre Dame can recruit linebacker at right now because of the guys that's already landed in its class.
So we're back into kind of a heavy visitor mode for April. So who of significance visited last week? Who do we have coming up this week that we should be super excited about?
Well, I'm not going to tell anyone to be super excited about anything. They can decide how excited they want to be. But yeah, last week Notre Dame brought some recruits on campus for visits. It's important for Notre Dame to continue to get those guys on campus in March as well, or in April here. And Notre Dame will continue to do so. The visitors that Notre Dame is expecting this week includes a quarterback recruit, Brady Hart. We're talking about Noah McHale as a linebacker, who I mentioned earlier, looking to get to Notre Dame. We'll continue to have some more updates on the Insider Lounge. It's where we always update our visitors list throughout the weeks, going into and out of visitor weekends. Some of the guys that were on campus last week, Gavin Nix, who we mentioned earlier, Raiden Vines-Bright, a receiver. Derek Meadows was on campus over the weekend before Easter. The big visit week or times will be the weekends. Notre Dame will try to get guys on campus on those Saturdays. So this coming Saturday, the Saturday after that, and then the Saturday for the Blue Gold game. Those will be the biggest visitor times, but there will be guys coming in the middle of the week. Sort of a lot of it lines up with kids' spring break schedules to get out and able to see a number of different schools during their spring breaks and find time to get to Notre Dame. So Notre Dame works on that as well. That's what we could be continuing to monitor over there on the Insider Lounge. That's where we have all kinds of recruiting information and hopefully have all the questions you need, or all the answers to all the questions you want.
We'll ask questions of ourselves too.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm talking too much.
That's okay. So Notre Dame has 19 commitments. They're way out in front of everybody else. You figure what, 24, 25 in this class, maybe?
I would be surprised if it's below 25, honestly. I don't know why they would.
But you still don't have tons of spots left. So my question is, have they positioned themselves well to finish strong in terms of guys that are going to come in and visit? The second part of that is, what are the positions where there's work to be done?
Yeah, I do think Notre Dame is in a strong position. There are still 4-star rivals, 250 rivals, 100 guys out there that Notre Dame has realistic chances of adding to its class. There's still work to be done, certainly. But yeah, I think we could get into official visit season for Notre Dame in June. And it's like, well, I mean, most of these guys that are coming in are already committed because there's not that many guys they need to add to the class left. I don't think that they'll necessarily get to all of these fulfillments necessarily. So here's what I think Notre Dame could still take. I think they could take 2 more cornerbacks, 1 more safety, 1 more defensive tackle, 1 more defensive end, 1 more linebacker, 1 more wide receiver, and 1 more offensive tackle. And I think there's a chance that they could take 2 receivers. Now, I don't necessarily think that they're going to, they have to fulfill all those needs, but those are sort of the needs that they're looking to address moving forward, and finding out, well, maybe we're not in love with whatever tackle is left for us, so we'll give 1 more scholarship to the receivers, or maybe we'll just go without another tackle or something like that. I'm just making up things. I'm not necessarily saying those as it relates to
we love
where they're at with recruitment.
When you make things up on the show.
That's right. That's what we're here for. So it is April Fool's Day after all. Maybe we've been lying to you this entire show. So I think there's plenty of work to be done. But Notre Dame has done an excellent job of getting in a strong position to have the class ranked number 1 as it is. Certainly when other classes catch up in terms of number of commitments, I don't foresee Notre Dame staying in that number 1 spot. But Notre Dame has done a good job of addressing needs. And we'll see if maybe some of those guys that are 3-star recruits that Notre Dame took early on continue to be thought of more highly from our recruiting analyst as they get to see them more and more.
Okay, so you do the future cast thing. We do not have props that go with that. We don't have Ouija boards or cards or anything like that. So the future cast, and I think Anthony Sacco was one of yours. Did you have another one? And do you think that person's still in play?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Should we come up with something? Should we have tarot cards? Maybe Tyler cards instead of tarot cards? I don't know.
If you know how to read them, then by God, let's do it. I think we should have the magic 8-ball and shake it.
Yeah. So I still have 3 future casts out for Notre Dame that I think for recruits who I think will pick Notre Dame. The one that I made last week, in addition to Anthony Sacco, was Derek Meadows, a wide receiver out of Las Vegas, Bishop Gorman. He visited again in March. That visit went well. I still feel good about where Notre Dame sits. I still think there's work to be done there. That's not like a recruitment that is over. I don't expect him to be announcing a commitment like by the end of the week or anything like that. So that is still where Notre Dame sits with him. I like that. It's something I've been considering for a while, but I wanted to see how that visit went and heard good feedback on that. So I put the prediction in there. The other 2 future caster ones I've had in for a bit now. I think I don't know if it was back in January when I put them in. The pair of cornerbacks that I think Notre Dame is in best position for, Mark Zachary out of Indianapolis and Dallas Golden out of Tampa, Florida. Zachary, I feel better about of the 2. I still feel good about both of them. I think Mark Zachary, I have the most confidence in it. Even if I'm putting all 3 of those guys on the list, I think Zachary would be at the top of my list in terms of guys most likely to end up in Notre Dame's class. And then we'll see how things play out with Meadows and Golden. But those are the 3 guys that are still outstanding that haven't made commitments yet that I have predicted to go to Notre Dame.
Okay, we are going to roll into what's going on next week or this week coming up. See, it was April Fool's next week. This week coming up. So on Wednesday, we're going to get to see a little bit more practice. And we should mention in the last practice we saw, Riley Leonard was there first on one of those knee scooters, and then he was on crutches. Steve Angeli wasn't there because he was sick, and so Kenny Minchie and CJ Carr got a lot of work Wednesday. So we'll see about the same amount of practice this Wednesday. We'll see the all-important stretching period, and then we see 5 individual periods. These practices have been shorter this spring so far than I can remember. It seemed like they were closer to 2 hours. They've been like 1.5 hours max during this spring. So that'll be an interesting thing to ask Marcus about. So we will have wide receivers and cornerbacks on Wednesday. So we'll have Mike Mickens and Mike Brown on Wednesday. Then on Saturday, we won't see practice, but we'll get a chance to talk to the coordinators, Al Golden and Mike Denbrock, and we will get tight ends and safeties. So we'll have a lot of interviews, a lot of content coming next week. So Tyler, as Notre Dame restarts spring practice for a second time, we get close to the halfway point. Who do you want to see more of? Who are you really interested in talking to and finding out more about?
Yeah, it's been a very sort of disjointed spring, seemingly, because of the way the schedule fell with spring break and then Easter break. So I don't know that I feel like we've learned a lot yet. I think the biggest takeaway has been the receivers look pretty good. The Riley Leonard of it all makes it more complicated to, judge where things are heading and where his progression is at. I really want to sort of focus in on what the defensive line and offensive line looks like in terms of we're getting into more physical practices now. How is that offensive line coming together? The cornerback group is interesting because the numbers are thin there. How are those guys holding up that are getting put into more and more challenging positions? Some of the guys that are transfers I want to focus on. Jordan Clark, I don't know that I spent a ton of time watching him. He was inactive earlier in spring, but I know has been active lately. How is he doing? How is he progressing? Adon Schuler is someone I've been very impressed by in limited viewings this spring. What does he look like as he continues to get more reps and more opportunities? And can Notre Dame stay healthy? They've been bitten a little bit by the injury bug with some star players recently, so staying healthy is of utmost importance. So a lot to sort of track. I think this is when I feel like spring football starts to get more serious, to me at least, is when we get in the back half when guys are really ramping things up, figuring out where they're at on the depth chart, and taking advantage of their opportunities as best as they can.
Our best look other than the blue gold game is going to be next week. They've actually moved the practice that was on the 8th to the 9th. And I think it's because of the eclipse that's going to be. I don't know that they want the players to see the eclipse or they're worried about them practicing during an eclipse, but they moved it from Monday to Tuesday that week. And then we will see a full practice. And I'm guessing we'll see some scrimmage periods on April 13th, a week before the blue gold game. For me, in addition to what Tyler talked about, I'm still curious about how all the linebacker slots play out. If there's people that move up or down or sideways in the linebacker alignment. And I am curious about both defensive end spots. I think there's such interesting people competing for those spots on both ends for different reasons. And I think that's going to be really interesting to see as well. And on offense, see, I don't expect the offensive line to gel in the spring. My hope is that they've kind of decided who their best 5 are by the end of spring and don't need to carry that into the fall. But last fall it did. I mean, there were Coogan and Rocco emerged in August and not in the spring. So we'll see if that takes place.
What are there things that you would like to see in the final weeks of spring practice that would make you consider this a successful spring for Notre Dame?
I would like to see a media appreciation day. No. I would have had one with the quarterbacks. I really would like to see the Mike Denbrock feeling really good about that field receiver position. Again, I think there's speed there. There's some raw material there. But is Mitchell the guy? Can KK Smith kind of come out of nowhere to challenge? And then Cam Williams is, so I'd like to see at least one guy there where you say, okay, they can kind of hang their hat and the other guys can kind of compete. I think that would be, if Eli Reardon could practice full time, I'd like to see some progress there.
Right.
Because I think he has a chance to certainly be, if all of them are healthy, I think he's the number 2 tight end. I think it's hard to jump over Mitchell Evans if he's healthy, but Eli Reardon has a world of talent. Running backs, that's going to take care of itself. You can almost put that on autopilot. And I mean, the safety competition is interesting to me. It's too bad Rod Hurd isn't here yet, but I do think it's giving some great opportunities to Adon Schuler and Luke Talich. I mean, those guys have kind of lived up to what I thought they might be this spring. Mm-hmm. So, then we'll just have to deal with the quarterbacks, I guess, in August. But I think this is a team that, you're not seeing dead ends to certain positions or certain questions about the team.
Right.
And, you feel pretty good about them being included in the first 12-team playoff if they continue on this trajectory and they get the quarterback thing fixed.
Sounds good. I think that's fair. Certainly, like Michael Park said, no more injuries. Staying healthy would be a successful finish. I think some of the Riley Leonard and Benjamin Morrison injuries sort of take the wind out of the sails a little bit from a star perspective. But I think like in terms of like actual development within the program, there's still plenty of things that can be happening in this next few weeks that we'll want to be monitoring to get a sense for where things are heading for Notre Dame this season.
That sounds good. Do we have any questions or comments we need to get to before we wrap it up?
No. Well, a few people have said Happy Dingus Day, so I want to verbalize that. I've responded to a few people on there. Happy Dingus Day. I hope some of you are getting to or have already enjoyed some Dingus Day festivities. I said that we're third place today behind Iowa, LSU, and Dingus Day because there's a lot of things going on today on Monday. But we appreciate everyone that joined us here tonight for Football Never Sleeps. We'll plan to be back again next Monday. Please make sure that you are subscribed to us here on our YouTube channel. Like I said, we're closing in on 2,500 subscribers. If you're not subscribed yet and you're watching this, please change that and hit that subscribe button. It doesn't cost you anything. Hit the bell for reminders of when we have content and hit the like button on the show to support it. Click on the link in the description below if you're not a subscriber to our website, because we're still offering our 30-day free trial to InsideNDSports.com. I'll use the promo code NDYT, which is exclusive to you guys here on YouTube when you sign up to get free access to our premium analysis and recruiting coverage and special access to us over on the Insider Lounge, which is where we spend just about every waking hour, except maybe on holidays. I didn't spend much time on the board on Easter, but I spent a lot of time there, even when I'm not working actively, writing a story or something. So please consider giving our website a chance. If you have not subscribed yet, there's a link to sign up in the video description below. Take advantage of that 30-day free trial and smash the like button. Yeah, TD4ND gets it. Smash that like button.
I'll tease us. I'm talking to Notre Dame's new athletic director, Pete Pavakwa, tomorrow morning. So be looking for a story from me coming soon after that.
All right. Sounds good. We appreciate everyone tuning in and have a great week.